Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, the so-called urgent debate from the Labor Party this afternoon has actually been pretty appalling. The leader of the Labor Party couldn't even devote 15 minutes to the issue. He had to...
Point of order. Honourable Trevor Miller.
Mr Speaker, I just want to seek an assurance that there is a written undertaking for this member to take the call that belongs to the Honourable Peter Dunne.
This, according to my schedule, is an either-or call. Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, as I was saying, so the so-called urgent debate, the leader of the Labor Party couldn't even devote 15 minutes of his speech to the issue at hand. He had to trail off down the Sky City path, which of course is a path that certain Labor MPs trot on the weekend, on Saturday night at a certain rugby match. Yes, certain Labor Party MPs were treading off down the Sky City path and enjoying the hospitality of Sky City, Mr Speaker. And that's actually a little like the H word we're not allowed to use in this chamber, Mr Speaker. And that's what we actually see out of this debate with the Labor Party today. And actually I think it would be very helpful if Labor MPs could rule themselves out whether they attended the Sky City box on Saturday night, because that would prove they weren't being hypocritical, and that they would then have the opportunity to show that they had the courage of their convictions. But, Mr Speaker, we need to have an assessment of how the relevant people involved in this particular issue have performed. Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister, first of all. The Prime Minister has once again upheld the highest standards in his ministry. Mr Speaker, there's no Tyto Phillip Field issue here. There's no trying to pretend it isn't happening for months on end, as the Labor Party did. Try and pretend that Tyto Phillip Field was not an issue, as the Labor Party did for months and months on end. The Prime Minister has an issue. He calls an inquiry. The inquiry reports. The Minister refuses to cooperate with the inquiry, and the Minister has resigned. That, Mr Speaker, is the quality of the leadership of this Prime Minister in this Parliament, which is way higher than actually occurred under the Labor government of the previous 9 years, which was absolutely shonky the entire time. Then, Mr Speaker, we have Mr Dunne. Mr Dunne has made mistakes, there's no doubt about that, and he has paid for those mistakes. And he has paid for those mistakes, and I'm sure wherever he is this week, he's contemplating on those mistakes. But, Mr Speaker, of course, he has had a proud 29 years in this Parliament, and he has accepted his punishment, and he has resigned from the ministry. And he has actually done that, Mr Speaker, and he has done it without complaint, which is appropriate in this. So those two people involved in this, the Prime Minister with his high standards, and in fact the person that was directly involved, have actually done their job. So what about the rest? What about David Shearer, Mr Speaker? Well, I'm sorry, David Shearer and his party has been hysterical and also completely hypocritical in terms of the way this has happened, Mr Speaker. The reality of it is that the Labor Party sat there, and in fact Grant Robertson said on The Nation on the weekend that Peter Dunne should leave Parliament altogether. He should leave Parliament altogether. Well, don't Labor members have short memories, Mr Speaker? Back in 2004, Leanne Dalziel leaked legally privileged case notes about a refugee to the media. She repeatedly denied that she had done this, and what was her punishment for this? She was sacked as a minister. She didn't leave Parliament. You didn't hear Grant Robertson in the Leader's office declaring that she should resign. She actually stood in the 2005 election and was reappointed after the election again, Mr Speaker. So the problem for the Labor Party is that they are completely double-standard on this. Completely double-standard. And, of course, they're quietly trying to back away a little bit now in terms of the issue, because they don't even want to know, because they know Phil Goff's in the gun, Mr Speaker. Phil Goff's in the gun for his leak. And I could quote all the comments about Phil Goff saying that it was ridiculous to have an inquiry into the leaks at MPAT, which of course he did. But the other one, Mr Speaker, that needs to be mentioned, well, there's two, and one is Winston Peters. And, Mr Speaker, Winston Peters, I'm sorry, it's just like a rerun of everything I've watched on TV for the last 25 years. Mr Speaker, you may not have seen yet the new Sky TV channel called Jones TV, but I tell you what, that speech this afternoon was like being on Jones TV. It could have slotted in between an 8.5 Hot Mum and Cheers, Mr Speaker. It was that relevant, it was that modern, and it was that much of a rerun of every speech he's made over the last 30 years, Mr Speaker. It was appalling, just like his performance on Campbell Live TV last night, Mr Speaker. And then we have Russell Norman, Rusty, who, in his race to be the leader of the opposition, races towards the cliff of requiring the emails of every MP to be made available to the Prime Minister of the day, and then, like a late realising lemming, actually stops just prior to the cliff and backs away. Meanwhile, while all his friends on the left are calling him illiberal and authoritarian, Mr Speaker. The problem is that these parties have not considered what they want, and they've done an appalling job in this issue.
Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I presume Judith Collins will be down shortly, because after that speech she knows it's within her grasp the National Party leadership.